I'm Hannibal Tabu on NERDSoul, and this is RockDASpot. My name is Hannibal Tabu. I'm a comic book writer and reviewer. I work for Comic Book Resources, where I do the BiPow, which is starting year 14 this March. I also have that column syndicated with the iHeartRadio podcast Nerdorama with Mo and Tawala. I write Timecore for Wonderman Comics, which is starting its 12-issue run March 15th. I write Project Wildfire, the Once and Future King, a weekly webcomic on operative.net. And I am going to be writing, I think they've announced it, some new source books for Aspen Comics, as well as a number of other... Oh, and I have a big announcement on Friday at WonderCon that I'm not supposed to tell anybody about yet. Well, I grew up in Memphis, and if there's anything you should know about Memphis in the 80s, it was insanely boring. I was bored out of my freaking gourd. Also, they tested me and saw that I had an IQ of 139, which is 1 point below the genius level. So I was surrounded by these people who were significantly not as well prepared as I was. And I was bored out of my gourd, and I had to make something better than everything around me. So I started writing. I started writing my first novel when I was 8 years old on college rule notebook paper. Not that wide crap that you got at the cheap stores. No, college rule. And I wrote 220 pages of college rule notebook paper. It's really terrible. It's scary, awful, terrible. But I was 8. But I finished it. And that was the first thing that I finished. And the idea of creating a much more interesting, finer world than basically what I had around me was everything that drove me to create these stories. I feel this pressure on the inside of my brain. The story's trying to burst out like Athena, and I can fight them, or I can just say, here, you crazy people deal with it. I'm letting it out of my head. What grabbed me about writing was the possibility more than anything else. That when I picked up Legion of Superheroes by Paul Levis, The Great Darkness Saga, and he says, I'm going to take this planet of Daxamites, I'm going to move the whole planet from a red sun to a yellow sun. And now everybody on the planet, millions and millions of people, have Superman powers. And then I'm going to tell them all to fly into space and turn their heat vision on the planet and carve it to look like my face. I was like, wait, what? When I was writing, there was no idea that was too crazy. There was no point where someone could say, you can't do that. I just did. I got it right here. It's clearly already done. And that kind of unlimited possibility for a skinny black kid in Memphis was enormously, enormously attractive. First and foremost, the driving force that starts me is almost always my spark is spite. People say, you can't do that, Hannibal. Oh, I can't do it? You mean you can't do it? Move out the way. So there is a prevailing concept of what black storytelling, about black fiction, black entertainment, black comics are like. And it is not a positive impression. I judged the Glyph Awards for 2 or 3 years, and a lot of things that people turned in saying, you should give me an award, were not up to par. They were not professional grade works. So if that's the perception that's being put out there, I exist to spite that in many ways. I was told I wouldn't, finish college. I finished college. I was told I wouldn't do lots of things. I did lots of things. So that kind of drives me. I love to hear the haters be mad about stuff. I love it. Second, there is, I have to be careful how I tell this story now. A very high-ranking person at Marvel Comics once was sitting next to me on a couch. This was the first year in San Diego when Marvel didn't have a booth. They had a hospitality suite, right? And I was rolling with Chris Ryall, who at the time was a different guy, but now is like the head guy at IDW at publishing. And Chris he's the Tom Brady of comics. He can make anything happen. He's amazing. He talks for 5 minutes to a female concierge at the hotel and finds out where the suite is. And we go up there and we crash it and we go in. I'm sitting there on the couch, and this guy, who at the time was not an executive, but now is he's really big at Marvel. And he turns to me. I have not spoken to him. And he turns to me and says, hey, I know you'd probably love to get in at Marvel, but unless you can make a name for yourself in some other field, we can see that you've got a track record, it's really not going to be possible for you, yada, yada. Now, this is, mind you, after I'd been the managing editor of Rap Pages, where we had sold 250,000 copies a month. This was after I worked for MTV Online. This is after I'd worked for AOL. None of this he knew, none of which he asked. He just decided to start off telling me, nah. So I said to him, I didn't ask you for anything. I'm sitting on a couch. I wasn't even talking to you. But thank you for letting me know the door is closed before I even knock. That's helpful. So with those things in mind, and my already overwhelming passion for spite, I said, this is what you're going to do. This is what I'm going to do. The big companies are focused on the market that we have, the audience we have. And I'm focused on the audience that we want, because that is future-proof. I've been a Wednesday warrior for so many years, I can't even count. I started the original BiPi in 2003, BiPal in 2003. But, you know, the direct market cannot last forever. This tower must fall. And when it does, there's going to be a new people looking for new things outside of that in different ways to get different things to serve them, with communities that look like them, heroes that look like them, owners that create and look like them. For the most part, the drive to create, the drive to achieve, the drive to surpass has been with me as long as I can remember. Definitely from Memphis. And I don't remember any point where I didn't see that happening in myself. Some of the higher points come from something I learned from an elder journalist. His name was Dennis Schatzman. He was at the Los Angeles Sentinel, and he was one of the big names reporting on the O.J. Simpson trial. And he was one of the people who I worked with when I was an intern at the Los Angeles Sentinel, the longest running black newspaper in the West. And he told me, he's like, just look at me, Hannibal. I come to work about 10. I go to work, go home a little after 4, maybe around 5. I spend all day driving people crazy, and they pay me for it. What's not to like? And I said, you know what? That sounds pretty good. Because he would get on the phone and hound people. He would drive places and hound people. And definitely the news media learned about him so much that he ended up in the O.J. Simpson series. This actor ended up portraying him in it because of the role that he played. Seeing that was inspirational for me. I learned a great deal there. So that pushed me in the direction of doing things for myself and doing things consistently, doing things at a professional level, because Dennis was easily as good, if not better, than any journalist in the city. And in Los Angeles, that's not an easy race to compete in. So I took all that and I applied it to my own creative endeavors, because journalism, while I loved it and while I loved doing it, led me to high points like I played chess with the genius from Wu-Tang Clan in a recording studio for a story once. I had them fly me all the way to New York so I could play chess with him, and while I was interviewing him, which he had never seen anything like that, which was amazing. I've seen some really ridiculous things happen, but I've also been chasing people for money. I've also been like behind some payments on some bills because, oh, what's that? Vibe didn't send me this $200 that they still to this day owe me. I haven't forgotten you, Jesse Washington. I ask you about this every time I see you. Or the source said, we're going to pay you for this story called The Decline of Western Civilization, how West Coast hip hop is over. And they assign this 6 months before Chronic 2001 comes out. And I spend $600 of my money researching it that's supposed to be recoupable. They kill the story. I don't get my money. I remember Frank Williams. I remember that you still owe me this money because you assigned me this story because that drama over the West Coast Bureau Chief stuff. I remember these things. There were good points. There were bad points. There were fun points. There were scary points. You know, there were bullets flying at certain hip hop events. There have been, you know, sitting up with the most amazing people in hip hop or in comics or in entertainment. I did this great interview with Karen White at the Beverly Hills Hotel, and she's breathtaking. She's just like in person. She's just, and I was single at the time. And I was like, dang, so is you and Terry Lewis, like, for real? Is that happening? So there were a lot of high points. There remain a lot of high points. Every time I go to Comic-Con, something new and fascinating happens. I was standing in a mall once, and a 10-year-old came up and quoted a line of poetry I'd said at a poetry reading years before. You know, there's so many great moments that honestly, I truthfully don't even think about. You know, the C Murder interview where he would say one word answers to everything I was saying, or or the very funny Master P at Rap Pages story where people think that he stole a box of clothes that I actually took. So all kind of craziness. Yeah. When I'm approaching a review, I have a responsibility to create something that if somebody lands here from Mars and they have no access to the book or the comic or the movie or whatever, that they can get an understanding enough of it, of what's happening in there, that they can decide for themselves whether I am right or I am wrong. I have to put all that stuff, I have to be able to say enough in there for them to get enough of that information. There are some exceptions to that in the latter parts of the buy pile, in the mess section or in the negatives. I may not go into that kind of detail, but in the stuff where I purchase, where I'm like, I'm recommending this, and here's why. And here's the things that are important about this that you need to learn. Here's the people involved and so on and so forth. Those are all relevant issues. When I was reviewing records, I was very heavy on quoting lyrics. When I was reviewing books, I was very heavy on excerpting passages, so people get a sense not just of what I thought of it, but what the work was itself. When I'm doing comics, it's different because I'm not pulling from a world, I'm creating the world myself. I'm making, in several cases, things, I wonder if I'm announcing that at WonderCon, I have to ask him. Anyway, I'm making things up out of my head that have not existed and do not exist in a world that is not real. Even if I'm writing something that's, say, like the historical fiction of Scoundrel, which was set in 1981, which is very, very close to reality, down to the Los Bukis t-shirts that they wear, down to the references to the Cinco de Mayo festival that they had, that was still very huge in that part of the town. But they weren't real, and I had to make them up. I had to make up the details in such detail that an artist could then take a look at it and be like, all right, now I can just put that on a page. I write full script in comics, so I don't take anything for granted from the artist because I never know who's going to be assigned sometimes until like the last minute. And I give them as much information as I humanly can so they have as little margin for error once they get there to say, oh, I don't know what he meant. Well, it says here what he meant. So there's two well-known methods of writing comics. The first is called Marvel style, which was popularized by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, in which the writer says, and on page 1, this happens, and on page 2, this happens, and on page 3, this happens. Yeah. And then the artist takes it and is like, this guy. And then he just draws it out, and then the writer comes back and fills it in with dialogue. I've done this. It felt like doing the work twice. I didn't like it. Full script is where you write panel 1, interior day. You're in this kind of room, linked to an image of a room like it, with these type of specifications, with this many people in it. These people look like this. These link, reference, yada, yada, yada. I have to create a picture. It's like writing a love letter to the artist, where I explain everything that they have to do, and then they hopefully are able to execute it with their own flair and their own style added therein. For me, that process, by the time I get the script, I really know where I'm going because before then I've done extensive outlining. I say all the time that the outline is the map and the script is the territory. They're not the same thing. And if you map yourself, if you figure out where you're going well enough in the outline, by the time you're scripting, you're really just mechanically recreating it. The hard, creative, how is this going to work stuff happens at the outline phase. And then I just have to, I get to have a lot more fun because when I'm scripting, I'm like, oh, and then in the corner, oh, like there's this one scene in this upcoming issue of Time Core, in Time Core 12 that'll be on sale on the 15th, where they're rolling a cart through a hall of stuff that had been taken from timelines that had been destroyed, and there's Dr. Doom's mask, and there's Iron Man's mask, and there's like something from, I think it's Steppenwolf's mask. I mean, it's like all, it's just carting it through, and it's in the background. It's not even important to the story. But those sorts of details, some of which are added by artists, some of which I add, are always enormously fun. And I do at the scripting phase because that's when, like a jazz musician, you know the song, and then you can do a little variable, you get a little riff on it, you know, and that's the way that works out for me. Project Wildfire is the story of an unlikely superhero who was only really looking to find a way to pay his tuition. He was an architecture student at a all-black college in Shelby City, which is our analog of Memphis. And you see those things on campus where it's like, sign up for medical experiments and get paid, and you tear up. So he took one, and he went in, and everybody else who was in the experiment died, and he got superpowers. And this was used to fight an outbreak, also ironically caused by the same people who were trying to find a way to fight it, of people turning into giant monsters. people becoming kaiju in these southern streets. So he's fighting to keep the streets safe from these kaiju while working for the people who, little does he know, actually created the problem. And there's a lot of stuff going on there. So there's many layers to it. First, because Will Watson is he's a regular dude. You know, he likes Popeye's chicken. He likes Jay-Z. He's a guy who just does stuff that a lot of black people can really relate to. But on top of that, he's truly a good person. Not because the environment where he was from was good, because his cousin that you see sometimes is a borderline criminal, and there's a lot of other stuff going on. But he has an innate goodness to him, and it shines through in all of his actions and all the things that he does and all the ways he tries to approach things. So writing him, for me, because I'm awful, is a creative stretch that I enjoy quite a bit in creating a hero who, and I often have to define him by the antagonist he fights. So when I make, for example, in the last volume, the Kaiju Queen, who is this first giant monster who retains her intelligence as she grows into this monster. And she has a different set of powers. So every kaiju she eats, she develops whatever power they have. So she's becoming a super monster, and she's hard to stop, and she's really hard to catch, and she's wily. And she was an enormously beautiful woman before, so she's used to having things her way. In developing these characters as a contrast to Will, it shows who he really is. It develops his character very strongly and brings him out. And I love writing this book. I know the last panel already. I know everything that's going to happen in this book, because we outlined the entire series. And I love writing this character so much, and I love being able to share it with people. What I don't like about the creative stretch is when I've written myself into a corner, and I'm like, shoot, and I'm searching my brain, and it's like I don't see the way to break through it, and I'm like, okay, which if I've got some time isn't so bad, but if I'm under a deadline, it's like, oh crap. What I love about it is, and I've never not had this, sooner or later, when I do something else, when I go take a shower, when I'm playing with my kids, when I'm doing whatever, it comes to me. And it's like a bolt from the freaking blue. It's this feeling that's like, yes. And I've always got a phone with me or something, so I can write it down, or I can just on my watch, I use this app called Drafts 5. And I can just read it into there, and it'll turn into text that I can then copy and paste later. And it's this feeling of, it's like being connected. Like when I used to say when I was singing karaoke, because I hosted karaoke for many years, that when I was really singing, when I was really feeling it, it wasn't like I was doing anything. It was like I was plugged into a circuit, and the power was flowing from above and out of me. And when that moment hits like that, when my brain finally puts together the pieces in the right way, there's no feeling like it. I'm an entrepreneur because I have to be, not because I really want to be, because functionally, I hate paperwork. I hate fulfillment. I hate carrying books. I hate carrying stuff. I hate all of those things, which is why a lot of people are like, are you going to have a table at this convention? Nope. You will not see me at a table, because I can't sit still and say the same thing over and over and over again to lots of people through the weekend, or I will murder someone. I've learned this about myself. So I do panels where I can expose people to who I am, my personality, and some of the work, and let them come to me. I started writing TimeCore because Nate Wonderman, the publisher, saw me on a panel at WonderCon 3 years ago and hit me up and says, hey, you want to write some books? I'm like, got some money? He's like, yep. I'm like, I'm all yours. And we're on our third project together now. So I make myself available to the community in that regard. I am an entrepreneur because the market is not a meritocracy. It is not a place where if you have the training and the skills and the experience and the product that you will be brought up. Because if that was the case, and these are white people, Unlikely Heroes Studios who do Super, who are some of the best storytellers in comics right now, they would be writing Iron Man, and they would be writing Justice League, and they would be writing and drawing, because they're that good. They're that good. But they're white people and they can't get put on. So I'm just going to put it out there. It's not a meritocracy. So there's that. I'm an entrepreneur, and I've been forced to be, and I don't really like it, to be honest with you. But it I accept that there are two jobs. There's doing the work and selling the work. And they're not the same job, and they're drastically different, have drastically different skill sets. I have to do both. I'm really good at doing the work. I'm kind of good at selling the work. And I could be better. I try to find ways to work around my deficits in that regard, especially work for hire. But it's a necessity for most black creatives in our industry to be entrepreneurial or never have anybody see your work. And that's just an unfortunate reality of the market. I won the 2012 Top Cow Talent Hunt, which was how I broke in after trying to write since like 2000. And working with different things and trying to get stuff going on and hiring artists and then flaking on me and one having an existential crisis and moving to Idaho and all kind of crazy stuff. So I've officially been in the industry since 2013. And in that time, I've done what feel like a lot of books. I'm on my first regular run with TimeCore. I just turned in TimeCore number 23, and issue 12 is about to hit the stand, so I'm not gonna be late. I'm not worried about that. But I feel like I'm getting to the point where I understand enough of how to put together a story and how to work with artists and how to get things done that I'm now moving into, like, I've got 2 or 3 science fiction projects this year, which I'm very excited about, because science fiction and space opera and fantasy is where I really want to live. Those are the stories I really want to tell more than anything else. I've also got this year, I can probably say this, 2 more historical fiction books coming out, which, you know, is not a genre that I was originally drawn to, but it's a genre where a surprising number of checks kept coming to me. So I was like, okay, sure, I'll take your money. And I apply myself and find the same sorts of joys and find the same sorts of fulfillment in the creation of the work. That when I get to the end of it, I'm like, yes, this is how these characters are supposed to work together. This is the spectacle I can create. This is the story I can create. This is the balance of plotting. So it keeps moving along. And I'm able to enjoy the work, even if it's not my first passion, even if it's not what I want to do. Because like I said, all somebody has to do is give me the start of something. Nate Wunderman said, it's a Romanian vampire saga with the Pythagoras. I'm like, okay, so you're gonna need to do this, then you're gonna need to do this, then you're gonna need, like, he just said the sentence and my brain starts going, spooling, and then the stories want to get out, so I let them out. I think about legacy a lot. And not just because, you know, the whole period where my kids were listening to the Hamilton soundtrack, and not just because, you know, I've literally felt like I've been tracking behind George Lucas since 1977. I went to USC as well, except I took a creative writing degree where he worked in film. I tell people all the time, I would love to be the Black George Lucas, but I'll settle for being the Black John Scalzi, who is a novelist who churns out a lot of stuff. People love his work. The detractors who are against him are wrong. And it's objectively easy to see that. And the right people hate him, which is exactly the way I would like, if those guys hate you, you're probably okay. And I would like to have that ability to live that sort of writing life, like Jack Nicholson and As Good as It Gets. I'm not going to rush into it. I have a full-time job right now that is not super demanding, and they understand that I do lots of crazy stuff on the side, and they don't care because I'm really good at what I do. So I'm able to not need to write for money. I can write the things that I'm like, no, I'm going to do this one. I don't need to do that one. I don't need to take that gig. And I write things that both make me happy and hopefully make the publishers happy. And the private projects I have, I really think I'm going to get my novel out this year. And things like Project Wildfire are passion projects that I can create because I feel a need for them to exist in the world. And when I'm done, I would like to be looked on the way we look on Paul Robeson. I would like to be looked on the way we look at Ida B. Wells. I would like to be looked upon as someone who was absolutely about walking his truth, and a truth that is the best for everybody, absolutely, but absolutely the best for Black people. And that I never apologized, I never backed down, and I never surrendered.